Hello and welcome back to another episode of What's Your History, the podcast that covers all areas of history, heritage and archaeology, no matter how big or how small, how well known or how niche. Today's guest was Olivia Sharrard, and she is a freelancer for a company known as York Unlocked. Now, it was very interesting to find out about this company. It is a history-based company where you are able to go and see parts of York that aren't normally open to the public. I hope you enjoyed this episode. It's nice to see you again, Liv.
Hi Kayla, it's lovely to be with you, thank you.
So would you like to share a little bit about York Unlocked, what it's about? The most I can gather is it means you can go into places that you wouldn't normally go into by the general public wise. Is that right?
Yeah, so York Unlocked, it's our third year we've run it now. We started right at the end of 2021, so we really got going in 2022, and we've run events in October 22, October 23 and October 24 coming up will be our third event. And York Unlocked is all about celebrating the architecture, old and new, of York, and really championing seeing buildings through fresh eyes and also looking at places in new ways. So we don't just focus on the old and we don't just focus on the new. We really look at York as it is today, taking in all elements of architecture over all the centuries that York has been a living city, and really looking at how we interact with buildings in our modern lifestyle, really. And it's buildings that you might walk past every day, and York's full of amazing buildings. So as a resident of York, you can really easily become quite blind to what's about. And we wanted to get away from the idea that York's all about only the Minster and the Shambles, and look a little closer at some of the more, you might call it, everyday architecture that you see around the city. Things like that might just be a shoe shop or a pub or something today that we just take quite for granted, really. But actually, when you look again, it's like, wow, that is amazing.
That actually sounds really interesting. Yeah, I must admit, it's the same with anywhere. You kind of get blind to your surroundings, and you miss the little details. Like on my Instagram and stuff, I started doing videos focusing on those little details. So like a little while ago, I did a video talking about boot scrapers. They're nothing exciting. They're just from the Victorian era, but it's just something you walk past every single day. And it sounds like York Unlocked is doing a similar sort of thing.
I'd like to think so, yeah. We really want to help celebrate just everything York has to offer, and we also look into aspects of city planning, I'd say, and that's something that our education remit focuses on, and trying to almost inspire younger generations to get into their own city planning, as well as just appreciating York for what it is.
And while you've been doing this, have you, in regards to like your research or anything to do with these buildings, have you come across any well-known names from like the architect world?
Well, interestingly, you should say that. So my specialism and background is more volunteering and community engagement. So I've come into York Unlocked as probably a member of the public would do, in that I don't have a lot of specialist knowledge about buildings or the city, other than just, oh, that's the Minster and that's the Shambles and that's a really cool old building, or that's an amazing new building set against something like wildly different to it. And that was my level of understanding of York Unlocked, really. So coming at it from quite a novice perspective, the names that I've learned, so things I've learned are what a Georgian building is, and it's something with a lot of symmetry, and I have been told many times names associated with Georgian architecture, but I'm not quite one for remembering specific names. Let's have a think. So then also I've learnt that Georgian buildings can look Georgian but not be Georgian, and that's an element of sort of building, not really restoration, but like something that different eras did to transform older looking buildings into newer looking buildings, and that type of thing. So that's something I've learned. And yes, for specific names, I'd probably have to refer to my education colleague Anna.
That's fine.
Yeah.
So, in regards to the buildings looking older than they are, can you give any examples of the buildings here in York that show that?
Micklegate is a really good example. So there's a building on Micklegate that used to be a part of the archaeology department at the University of York, and is now the Safe Stay building, and that is, in fact, I don't know if I've got this right or not, but it was it's definitely Georgian. It might have been one of the buildings that has been made to look more Georgian than it actually is. I believe it might be one of these buildings that's like medieval behind and then Georgian on the front.
Oh, that sounds really cool, actually. And just that in itself, I suppose in a way it's a bit like the archaeological side of it. It's like the stratigraphy of the building. So like when you do archaeology, obviously you dig into the soil and you've got the layers showing you what time periods, whereas with a building, I guess it's just that brick or that wall or that chimney or that door sort of thing will then tell you that's history.
Yeah, I mean, I think because I did my degree in archaeology like 10 years ago now, so a lot of my specific knowledge, I've not continued that element of it. My knowledge definitely comes more now with how to engage people in looking at buildings from whatever angle they're coming at it from, whatever perspective they're coming from, and really driving engagement around what we do in York Unlocked, I'd say.
Brilliant. So being a volunteer coordinator, what exactly does that mean? What are you encouraging volunteers to do?
Good question. Ooh, I like it. So for me, I got into volunteer engagement in a kind of accidental way. So I was quite focused on wanting to go into archaeology and collections and behind the scenes stuff. And I once I'd done my undergrad in archaeology in York, I then went down south again, that dreaded place. So I studied at UCL for my master's and did museum studies at UCL, and it was amazing to be in such a contrast from York, doing a similar subject, but in a really different environment. And whilst I was at UCL, I worked at Pitt Rivers on this is a museum in Oxford, I should say. So Pitt Rivers Museum in Oxford, part of the collection of museums with Oxford University. And Pitt Rivers is quite a controversial museum, and because it's more like a museum of a museum in many respects. So the project I was involved with was a collections and exhibitions project called Beyond the Binary, to really transform the way that the museum interpreted its collections, and to bring in a lot more LGBTIQ narratives and voices into that storytelling of the objects, and to bring in a lot more personal experiences and lived experiences from communities in and around Oxford and much further afield, because the Pitt Rivers is an ethnographic museum, so an ethnographic collection. And it was a really interesting project. And I got involved as the collections and exhibitions officer, thinking, I really wanted to do behind the scenes, like collections, exhibitions, that side of it. And because it was a project that engaged communities around Oxford and further afield, a lot of the role remit was to work co-creatively with communities. And as I went through my role, it was a year's contract to do this. I realised that I was really enjoying the people element of it a lot more than purely the collections and exhibitions side. So quite accidentally, I realised, actually, I quite like working with people. So once that contract came to an end, then it was COVID for quite a long time. So I was finishing up my work at UCL on my research there. And then after that, moved back to York thinking, okay, right, we're in a really different landscape after COVID now. So what's about? And it was in right at the end of 2021 when then I saw this advert come up for York Unlocked. Kathy, who's our founder, had come up with this idea, and she'd just put an advert out onto Reach Volunteering for a volunteer manager. And I saw it and I was like, you know what? That sounds really interesting, and what an interesting landscape as well to be trying to run an event, given that no events have happened for like however long now, since 2020. And I got involved. I said, yes, I'd love to be involved. I'm really keen on volunteer engagement and what this could mean for York. Like the rest is history, really. I've been involved ever since. I absolutely love it. And to me, what I am really passionate about in the volunteer manager role with York Unlocked is to really bring people into the project in a way that is really accessible for just anyone who has an interest. Because I think the lovely thing about York Unlocked is that it's not trying to be pretentious. Like, our tagline is quite, well, not literally, but like kind of our vibe, if you will, is that we're just nosy. We love these old buildings, and new buildings, and we come at it from very street level. We see a building, we go, love to see in there. And especially, that's very true of me. Like, I don't know a lot more about the buildings other than I'd really like to see in that. And so when sort of taking that element into volunteer engagement, there's a lot of people around York that absolutely love the project and what we're doing. And over the 3 years, I've had quite a lot of volunteers now. The first year I had 60 event volunteers. The second year I had 80, and this year I've got about 75. So quite a lot of people have been involved over the last 3 years, and I want to make it a really accessible volunteering experience. There's no prerequisite that you have to have any knowledge of any buildings. You can just turn up as long as you're going to be enthused with the project and enthused with our values. Then we'd love to have you, and that's where I come at it, really, from a volunteering perspective. Does that answer your question?
Yes, sort of.
Okay, go again. You can always let me know.
Yeah, no, it was it's genuinely interesting. Is there anything like this anywhere else, like very similar to York Unlocked? Like, say, like, I'm sure there's something like this in London or something.
We are, yeah. So we're inspired by London Open House and Bristol Open Doors, and there's also a Welsh Open Doors and a Scottish Open Doors, and New York also has one. So Kathy, who founded York Unlocked, she'd visited definitely London, I think, and then possibly others, but she moved to York, I think, during COVID, around that time, and she was quite baffled that York didn't have a similar version of open house and open doors. So that's where her inspiration came from.
Don't blame her. I'm sure if anybody's ever come to York, you will see there's literally fantastic history everywhere you go, literally everywhere. And the buildings themselves, that yes, a lot of them may be Harry Potter shops now, which is a very modern thing, but the buildings themselves can go back further than that. As you were saying, some of them are Georgian, some of them are obviously going to be Victorian, but then some of them are even older than that. Like, the Shambles alone has medieval buildings on it, which that's amazing. And the fact that you can actually still go into them. A lot of them are cafes now, because that's the same with anywhere nowadays. It's all bookshops and cafes. But it is, I think this project that you're doing is a really wonderful thing, to be able to go behind the scenes, to be able to see those little details that you wouldn't normally see. Is there anything, while going in these houses, is there anything that stuck out to you the most? Like maybe that little bit of wallpaper or that little bit of graffiti or something?
Yeah, I've had definitely my favourites over the last couple of years. I've really been struck actually by the modern buildings and learning about how buildings might be repurposed, or how modern buildings are used as a quite juxtaposition between the old and new in York. And I think in the first year, it was amazing getting to see inside the Hiscox building, which is on Peasholm Green, just next to the Black Swan Inn. It's got a massive glass frontage, and in the middle of the building, there's a giant rocket, so it stands as an art piece essentially. And I remember having one of our quite early meetings in the Hiscox building to ask if they'd like to be in York Unlocked, and it was remarkable. I was like, wow, I don't recall being in a building like this in York before, really. So that's something that has stuck out to me. And an older building, I'd say, is St Mary's Tower on Bootham, that was really cool to go into last year. It's on Bootham. It stands as sort of one of the little towers against the wall, and the front of it is it's a kind of circular building, and the front of it doesn't join up properly, and you kind of wonder, like, how, why, and what is it like inside? And it's as you would imagine, quite just rustic inside. And then also got to venture into Fishergate Tower, Fishergate Poston, is it? Last year, and the volunteers there weren't York and Lot volunteers; they were their own society volunteers, and they were doing an amazing job of explaining Fishergate Poston, its history, its archaeology, to a lot of people who were going in there. So that was quite amazing. Just trying to have a think of any others this year. What I'm really excited for, it's not a building, but I am definitely going to make a beeline for it, is St Anthony's Garden, which is quite near the Hiscox building. It's also on that Peasholm Green area of York. They've got the conservation, Pinnacle Conservation, are doing sort of hands-on demonstrations of traditional building working techniques, and that really appeals to me. So they're doing different things like plastering and stuff like that. So that's something I'm keeping an eye out for this year, as well as this is something I'm also really excited for, the thin ice press, which will be demonstrating traditional like paper printing techniques, I believe. I hope I've got that right. So as I say, I'm not quite the buildings person in York Unlocked, but I try and absorb as much as possible.
So I'm gathering from what you're saying there that it's different buildings every single year, or are some of them the same that you go to each year?
Some of them are the same, and some of them are new, and some of them haven't been in every year. So the first and second year, we had I think we had around 50 buildings the first year, and then around 70 buildings the second year. The first year and the second year we had fairly similar buildings. The second year, most of the buildings in the first year were included again, with the addition of extras in the second year. And then this third year, we have had a kind of core building basis of around 40 buildings, just to kind of refine who we're working with, who is involved quite steadily in the event. And then there have been buildings this year that, like the thin ice press, that are included that haven't been previously. Yeah.
That all sounds really, really cool, actually. So, when you have your volunteers, what did they do exactly when you go around? Are they the tour guides, I'm assuming, something like that?
So, our volunteers doing all manner of things. We have our event volunteers who steward buildings during the actual event. So, not every building requires volunteers. About 20 each year require volunteers, and so the people who sign up to be event volunteers are essentially they meet and greet, they provide directions, and sometimes if they're really keen to do so, they can do a bit of research into the buildings that they're stewarding, or have information that a few buildings provide in a bit more depth about what visitors are actually coming to see. So I always say it's not a requirement of anyone to know anything about the buildings, because I don't want that to be a barrier to volunteering. So on whatever level people would like to engage as an event volunteer, that's absolutely fine with me. And then buildings such as Bishopthorpe Palace are really quite keen to get additional knowledge across to visitors, and so they have provided specific information that volunteers can have a look at beforehand, if visitors ask specific questions. But the actual tours of buildings that have ticketed tours, they're not our volunteers. They're the building representatives who are actually who we're engaging with to open their buildings for the event, if that makes sense. So the only person that is that's a York on Lot volunteer who is going to be running a tour is on the city cruises. So we partner with city cruises to run an architecture of the Ooze cruise, hilariously, and the words, the script, and the volunteer delivering it have all come from York Unlocked. So that's the exception. But otherwise, event volunteers are wonderful meeters and greeters, and just they facilitate the smooth running of the event operation, essentially. And then, moving away from event volunteers, we have our core and support team of volunteers, as well as our trustees. So everyone in York Unlocked over the last couple of years has all been doing it on a voluntary basis, and the core and support team are the ones who really put the event together and do all the planning and the prep. And we have roles from everything, like me, from volunteering and volunteer engagement, a bit of community engagement, to the project lead who engages with the buildings and does the planning and more of the strategy side of things. Then we have education who work on engaging schools in all the questions that we want to ask about York and planning and architecture and that kind of thing. And our team of, we have marketing as well, and then our team of area managers who help to run the event in a little bit more depth on the weekend itself, and they do a little bit more prep in advance. So they help to gather things like risk assessments and all that really exciting stuff. And then our trustees also do an amazing job at really guiding us with their knowledge and experience gained throughout their amazing careers as well.
Very full team.
It's a lot, isn't it? Yeah, I know. Gathering everyone over the last couple of years has been quite a big task. This year as well, special shout out goes to the person who's helping to coordinate all of our admin, because that they've made a huge difference to just everything that we've been able to do this year. They've managed all the ticketing this year, which is always quite a scary, I would say, point in our calendar. There's always a lot going on at that time. So yeah.
And how often a year do you do the York Unlocked? Because you were saying that the next ones are going to be in October, but do you do them at the beginning of the year as well, or is it always in October?
So far, it's always been October. Given that we're a sort of entirely volunteer team, it would be at this stage we don't have the capacity to run it more than once a year. So yeah, it's happened each October since 2022. I mean, if we can dream of having the resource to make it more than once a year, and the team has definitely thrown around that idea of how do we make it more than just once a year. How do we have visibility throughout the year? And there are so many things we'd love to do, and at the minute we're just embryonic enough to not have enough resource to be able to do anything more, really. But yeah, there's always the wish list.
Well, that all sounds actually really interesting. When do you normally do the York Unlocked? I'm assuming it's a weekend thing.
It is, yeah. We do we've done kind of early October, so fairly near October half term, and just before the weather starts getting really bad, I'd say.
Fair enough. One year I hope to go and see this because it does sound like a really interesting thing. Unfortunately, working in heritage means you don't tend to get weekends. But no, it does sound like a really interesting and definitely a unique experience for people to be able to see York in a different light and stuff. So I think what you're doing is an amazing contribution to the knowledge and history of York itself, and seeing it from a different perspective as well. Because as you said at the very beginning, people come to York and go, Minster, Shambles, that's a thing. Jorvik, that's a thing. But I suppose it is one of those things like there is just so much. Like you can just walk around the streets alone and you can just see so much history, and it's really cool that you're getting to do this sort of thing.
I agree. I often advise people when they're visiting York and they say, what is there to do in York? One of my things that I genuinely mean is just walk around. There's so much to even just seeing the outsides of buildings and what there is around you in York. Like that can be a full day in itself, especially if it's lovely weather. That would be my preference, actually, just to be able to walk around the city, to maybe do the walls and get a full sense of the scale and everything that sits beside each other. So quite genuinely, when people say, what should I see? I'm like, just have a walk around.
Yeah. Well, thank you for this. Is there anything else you want people to know about York Unlocked, or how to get involved with York Unlocked if they really wanted to?
Well, always keen for volunteers. If you would like to be a part of York Unlocked, you can email me directly at volunteer@york-unlocked.org.uk. I'd be more than happy to chat about interests and roles that we have available. With the weekend event coming up, there are many buildings that are opening that don't require tickets, so you can just rock up on the day. It's all completely free, and our programme, if you head to our website, which is York Unlocked, I think it's .org.uk, york-unlocked.org.uk, then you can have a look at our programme this year and check out what other things are going on, including our education remit and the previous events. So yeah, I think that pretty much covers what we've got going on this year. But yeah, anyone is welcome to get in touch. Like I say, keep an eye out on our socials. We've got things like Facebook and Instagram and LinkedIn. So we keep our most up-to-date information on there.
Wonderful stuff. Well, I will make sure to put all that down below. Well, thank you, Olive, for coming on here and talking about something very different and unique. And I love that it is a baby company, but I hope it flourishes and will grow and it'll become a regular thing for people. I think this is definitely a really cool thing. So, thank you.
Thank you so much.